This is Al. We're in Philadelphia at the Kelly Writers House here. It's week 4 of ModPo 2019. And now, this is a week when we read about the Baroness Elsa von Freitag Loringhoven. And the Baroness, the only Baroness poem in the main syllabus is A Dozen Cocktails, Please. Now, this is not a cocktail, but I think somewhere between the Baroness's 12 cocktails, I mean, imagine a dozen cocktails, Emily Harnett. What would you be like after 12? Never mind.
Want to be standing up.
You would be the most articulate person in the room after 12. And somewhere between the Baroness's 12 cocktails and Gertrude Stein's salon, is red wine. So we have our red wine. It's a Malbec. It's great. Cheers. Sorry, Gabe and Erica. Maybe Erica's going to whip out her red wine. Anna, come on, you don't have anything in there. But
you can't cheers with an empty glass. It's bad luck.
You know what Anna's thing is? It's not that she doesn't like wine. Jason, cheers. Cheers. He's going to grab his pitcher of martinis over there. It's not. It's not about that Anna doesn't like wine, but she doesn't like red wine.
I know that's really lame.
Okay, that's really lame. Okay,
it's really lame.
So I want to make a few announcements, and then we're going to get started. First of all, hello, Jess. Hi.
Hey, Al.
You've had a good week, I think. A hectic week, but a good week. So far, it's only Wednesday. Amber Rose, hello.
Hi, Al.
Emily Harnett, it's good to see you.
Hi, Al. Good to see you, too.
Hey, we missed you the last couple of weeks, but here you are. It's good. Anna, Lily,
hello.
Hi. And Jason, hello, Jason.
Hello, Al.
How are you? And we have, in the Hangouts, we have Gabe from Chicago. Hi, Gabe.
Hello, Al.
Hey, good to see you. And Erica is here. Hello, Erica.
Hi, Al.
Hi. And Jake Marmer is out there somewhere. Jake?
I am here. Hey.
Jake, when it's still daylight out there. When are you coming east, please?
Oh, I want to come soon. I want to come
December
soon.
or
I don't know if you, I'm liking your t-shirt, Al. Like, if there was like somewhere in Philadelphia a t-shirt like that, I would just travel
I'll give
for
you
that.
mine. You can have
This is
mine. This is
amazing.
Susan Howe, Singularities. When Susan Howe was a Writers House Fellow some years ago, we all got these shirts. I think you got one.
man.
Weren't you in the class?
Sure was.
Yeah, you were. Ooh, I'm sorry, Amber Rose. The second caller is going to get a copy. It's my extra copy of My Emily Dickinson by Susan Howe. And that's a topic for week 1 and also a topic for chapter 9.1, week 8. But why not give it away today in anticipation of week 8? Fantastic. Okay. Hello, everybody. A couple of announcements. New York meetup in the city, Manhattan, 53rd Street branch, this Saturday at noon. New York Public Library, 53rd Street branch. Next week, Anna, where are some of us going to be next week?
Boston.
Going to be in Boston. And a week from tomorrow, Thursday, not Wednesday, for a live webcast, where will we be?
MIT.
Wow. We're going to be at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where one of the humanities faculty, tenured faculty member, is a crazy poet by the name of Nick Montfort, who actually, as a poet, makes an appearance in week 9, chapter 9.2. And he will be joining us.
It'll be great.
It's
Can't
going to be
wait.
fun. So next week, we're not doing our week 5 webcast on Wednesday. We're going to do it on Thursday. And I think it's at 6:30 p.m. So even though we're going to be in Cambridge, Massachusetts, coming to you live from there, and there'll be people in the room, ModPoers who will make their way to MIT, maybe about 20 people who have signed up for it. Of course, it's a regular webcast. You can watch wherever you want from anywhere to join us. Okay. A couple of starters. First of all, a tweet on Stein from Bota Bianca, and I'm just going to read it. I really loved it. Bota Bianca. I actually started reading Stein after having been introduced to her work in ModPo. I love it, and you all made my life more, and then there's 3 dots, Profound and complicated. Thanks for that, says Bo to Bianca. Okay. Now, I'm going to also quote Wes Freeman, whose thread is called Wow, Baroness. And I'm going to ask some people here, let's say Jake and Jess and Emily. I'm going to ask you to respond to Wes in any way you like. Wes is writing about the Baroness. Okay? And before I read Wes, I'm going to say that we are at 610-616-3208, and we have Anna looking at the forums, so post to the forums, and Lily's looking at Twitter, as are a few of us. And I think Ambrose is doing Facebook. All right, here's Wes Freeman, Wow, Baroness. All right. I am surprised and delighted that this was a real person. I read Dozen Cocktails 4 times. Here's to Wes. 4 times, just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding what she seemed to be talking about. But as Freud, from his ice chest, would say, sometimes a vibrator is just a vibrator. So she's Whitmanian, I guess? I like the poem not just for its salaciousness, but for its kineticism and the eye-popping one-liners she sprinkled through it. You're buffered about by her terse lines and pugilistic wordplay, but then a line like, "What's the dread matter?" or "I don't hanker after Billy boys, but I am entitled to be deeply shocked," comes along. First Gertrude Stein, and now this. I love this week, says Wes. Okay, Jake, then Jess, then Emily respond in any way to Wes, and I'm just going to throw the number out again, 610-616-3208. Jess.
So, full disclosure, this was my first encounter with the Baroness.
Cheers.
Yeah.
We're going to
Cheers
finish
to
this
that.
bottle of Malbec. If you have a couple of glasses, you'll start liking red wine.
Yeah, that's how it works, right?
Look at Jake. Jake, sorry, buddy. Sorry. Oh, he's got some vodka there. Oh, fantastic. Okay, sorry, Jess.
That's quite all right. So, wow, this was a real person. I would echo that. And I think what I will say is that I had some overripe bananas and a lusting palate, so I made banana bread today.
In honor of the Baroness.
Let's say yes.
I'm going to guess that the Baroness never actually made banana bread or even worked in the kitchen.
Yeah,
but
probably not. And speaking of domesticity, one of the things that I found exciting about this poem alongside Stein's work is that really what is happening in all of this crazy kineticism, as Wes put it, is just the sort of sheer pleasure and like electrification of word against word. And I feel like in Stein, so often that is what's happening, is this word is following another word and it's rubbing up against that word and something is happening.
Oh, that's so nice.
In that arrangement. And I feel like the same, could be said for this, albeit in maybe a different, sillier
Well, but
register.
I think you made a connection between Stein and the Baroness. There are not that many connections,
Yeah.
but electrification, maybe, is that the word you use? Electrification?
Yeah.
That's a pretty great word. I mean, Anna and I know because we spent some time with Jennifer Scapitone talking about the Baroness in a piece in a video about the poem X-Ray by the Baroness, which is in ModPo Plus. And electrification was kind of Jen's big thing. Yeah. Let's turn to Jake. The Baroness, Jake, right up your alley, I think, right?
Well, I love the post. Like, wow, Wes. I mean, this is great. Like that whole thing sounded like a poem itself. Wes is articulate and beautiful and clearly
Rookie of the
smitten,
year, I
ran.
think, so far, Wes Freeman. Yeah.
Yeah,
that we give out
it's
that award.
fantastic. I want to respond to like the very first thing that Wes says about like this is a real person. This person really existed, and I think part of the appeal of the Baroness, I think, is that her persona was very much cultivated. It was a performance of Baroness, like
Her biographer calls it a body performance.
Yeah, I think so. In as much as a poet writes poems, being Baroness was a poetic act, like cultivating this persona, this voice, the visuals, everything.
In a way, what you're saying, and I want to turn to Emily next, what you're saying, Jake, is that the Baroness was kind of more a real poet than the other poets who wrote their poems, but like Williams in his attic, didn't really live them out, didn't live the freedom and liberation of the poems. And the Baroness actually was the poem. She did it. She walked the walk. And that's something we can celebrate. Yeah, no?
I don't know if I would go that, like, okay. You said that, and I like what you're saying, but these are different, modalities of performance.
Yes, of course. But you're a performance poet, and I believe that you seek, when you perform, to be doing the poem rather than simply reading it or conveying its semantic meanings.
Definitely. I'm not hating on poets who write on the page,
Okay,
like
I get it. All right.
I love that too.
All right. Emily, you get the third and final word on Wes's, astonishment about the Baroness. Then we'll go to the phone.
Sure. I just really love that word kineticism, which I know that Jess mentioned a little bit earlier. And I think it puts Baroness in context with Williams and the images we read, where if you think, thinking about kineticism as a sort of analog for imagism, and as a way of understanding what the Baroness is doing, is writing this experimental poem, which also exists in a different sensory space, right? Which somehow channels like motion, right? And the motion of a sort of frenetic drunk person into language. And I don't typically think of motion as the domain of language, but in this particular poem, she's able to capture that, and that's really exciting.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Emily. Chris, we have someone on the phone. Oh, we're still chatting away. All right. While we're waiting for because Chris likes to talk to the people who call. Let me just make a list of the poems were in the main syllabus. Stein's A Long Dress. Stein's A Carafe That Is a Blind Glass. Stein's Water Raining and Malachite. Stein's statements on narrative, on the noun, on repetition, on composition. Stein's Let Us Describe. And Stein's If I Told Her, verbal portrait of Picasso, which we have an audio of, so we'll probably play. The Baroness, A Dozen Cocktails, Please. Tristan Tzara, To Make a Dadaist Poem. And a weird one, John Peel Bishop's sonnet called A Recollection, which, how do you read that, Anna?
Carefully.
Thank you. And in ModPo Plus, lots of Stein. Some Tender Buttons, Another Portrait, Christian Berard, Tender Buttons, A Table, Glazed Litter, A Substance in a Cushion, and The Shawl, which is really great. Just yesterday, we recorded a video with the great Jerome Rothenberg on The Shawl, which was fun. We have Tracy Morris, who's a Week 10 poet and a friend who will be visiting us here at one of our webcasts. Tracy responding to Stein. We have some Hemingway cubism. We have an experimental book review by Stein, which I love, and some more Baroness, more Duchamp. Kurt Schwitters, his asthmatic poem, and Mina Loy. Chris, who's on the phone?
Hey, Al, thanks for your patience. I was chit-chatting a little bit there.
I can tell, Chris. You have to have fun. I mean, it's not all technology.
I know. Okay. Calling from Boston, we have Helen O'Neill.
Helen O'Neill. Hi, Helen.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, we're going to meet you up in Boston.
I know. This is exciting. I'm watching you all drink your wine.
Oh, yeah. Here's to Helen. Do you have at least popcorn up there in Boston? I mean,
I just made some coffee. I haven't had it yet, though.
Coffee?
But anyway.
You're in the same time zone. It's 8:15.
I know.
Time for wine.
This is all amazing. Technology. It's like crazy.
Hey, Helen, which of the events are you coming to? Both, I hope.
No, I won't make the MIT, but I hope to get to Brookline. The reading that you're doing
We're going to do a
Brookline?
meetup. Yes, at Lisa Newshouse.
And you're reading two poems? You're going to study two
We're going to be
poems?
doing a collaborative close reading, just like we're doing here, except you'll be part of it.
Are you saying ahead of time what you're going to be reading, or?
Oh, good point. Anna, are we going to say ahead of time? We can say right now, and we can also mail it out, I think.
Yeah, we can listen.
All right, so we're going to do two poems by Larry Eigner, who lived in Swampscott, Massachusetts, which is north of town, near the water.
Yes.
And he was confined with a physical disability to a wheelchair and wrote thousands of poems in Massachusetts, and then moved to San Francisco, where he started to hang out with the language poets who were younger than he, and the San
Wow.
Francisco Renaissance poets. Two poems by him that are just really looking out the window poems. Just an amazing people doing disability studies, particularly out in the West Coast. There's a sort of disability studies movement studying Aigner like crazy, and these are two great poems. And then a poem by a poet who is not in ModPo yet. As Eileen Miles would say, this person's name, Rabbit Lowell. And it's a poem by Rabbit Lowell. And we're thinking of opening up a confessional poetry section of ModPo Plus, guest chapter 6. And Anna's giving me the Anna, I'm a modernist, why are we doing this look? Yes, so confessional poetry is not our thing, but we're going to try it in all earnestness, and you'll be there for that. And Lisa New is a big fan of Lowell. So that was a long answer to your question.
Very nice. No, thank you. I called because I wanted to win the book, but I guess I'm not sure if I'm the first call.
You're the first caller. You didn't win the book, but you know what?
I didn't win the book. I'll call
tell you
again.
what. No. I think Jason, who's really into people getting free books, if I give you this book, Jason will run up to my office and he'll pick out another book we'll give to the second caller. Would that sound fun?
It sounds great.
Okay.
I'm all for that.
So when we're finished talking, you'll
No,
give.
but I even have a question.
Oh no, I'm getting there. Well, but when we finish talking, you'll give Chris Martin your mailing address, and Lily
certainly will.
Applebaum will mail you a copy of My Emily Dickinson, which you are assigned to read before we see you in Boston.
Okay, I had it out of the library and I brought it back, and now I want to own it.
Great,
So, yeah.
and it is my copy. So So Helen, is it really true this is your first year or second?
It's my first year ever. Yeah. I've done other Coursera,
I'm
but
the only one applauding Helen.
yeah, thank you.
How
came
did you?
along at a great time.
How did
Really
you find
I-
us?
Well, Coursera will send me, because I've taken a lot of, art classes, and they'll just send me, this is coming up, and, I'm a writer, and I love poetry, and I've spent a lot of time reading about Rauschenberg, and I just finished John Cage's biography when this class came. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah,
timing
perfect.
was amazing.
Yeah, Cage is coming up in the course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
What's that?
Cage is coming up in week 9. And we do a whole week on chance.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
On what?
On chance, aleatory poetry,
okay.
chance operations, quasi non-intentional writing. I mean, we lose most people in week 9. Like, who wants to study quasi non-intentional writing? The answer is Jess does.
Well, I put up
That's
a question
true, Al.
about chance. Yeah. I had posted a question about chance operations. Was it the same as improvisation?
Yeah.
And somebody has answered me. So it's been it's been great.
Jake did. I think the answer is no, but they're cousins. They're really good cousins.
Absolutely
they like
cousins,
each other.
But I loved his explanation about the Afrocentric and then maybe the Eurocentric.
Yeah, well, wow. Jake is kind of a genius.
Is Jake there?
Yeah, he's here. Jake, say hi to Helen, please.
Hello. I love that question. That wasn't my dichotomy. That was an essay by Bernard Lewis. He's a jazz musician, and he wrote on that very specific question, like juxtaposing his music to music of Cage, and he was using terms aphrological and urological.
Well, you're still a genius because you quoted somebody. This is a fucking community, Helen. Sorry, I started to drop the F-bomb. I know that Boston is a very prim place.
We just did that sonnet with, that was really interesting.
Fuck you, half-ass, yeah. I didn't mean that to you. That's...
I know.
People, wait a minute, hold on. People following at home who haven't read The Bishop are very upset with me now.
I know.
Because I said something nasty to a first-time ModPoer. Helen, I think you should just stay on the whole time.
We'll just chat. I have so much to say and so much to ask.
All right,
you guys are great. I love the panels. You're all so smart and
Not
I
Emily
love
Harnett. She's
I
banished.
mean, you compliment each other. It's beautiful. I mean it.
I'm going
I
to
was
compliment
a-
Amber
you know.
Rose right now. Amber Rose, you're so great. And you have the weirdest keyboard.
Al, stop interrupting. She's saying something nice.
Oh, you know what I'm going to do, Helen? I'm going to ask 3 people here to answer your question even before they hear it. So here we go.
Oh, okay.
All right, Gabe, Lily, and Amber Rose, while Jason runs up and get a nice book. Okay.
Okay.
So
Good.
go ahead.
Good. But the question is, and I cannot find where you all said it, but I thought it was in the lecture, let's say, about the sonnet writer, but maybe not. But somewhere it said, a word is not a thought.
That
And
was
that's-
quoting
yeah.
William Carlos Williams, who says,
Okay.
words aren't about ideas. They're not beautiful thoughts. They're things. Words are things. Here, there. You put them on like a canvas. Something like that. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah. So does anybody else want to talk about that?
Oh, great.
'cause but I mean, what's the purpose of a word then?
Great.
I mean,
That is a profound question. Would you stay on the line
sure.
so you can respond to the responses? Okay, let's go to Gabe first, then Lily and Amber Rose.
Yeah. First, what is the red wine doing to you guys? This is like really strange so far.
You don't have any wine there?
I mean, yeah, I do, but I'm
Well,
not
go-
going to open
Al's
a
wine is spiked.
Go to the
Al's
wine
wine
cabinet.
is
I know
spiked.
you have school tomorrow morning, but
job, Al. No, I'm kidding.
Far away, isn't it?
What was I going to say? Okay, to answer the
I
question,
can't hear Gabe exactly.
I suspect that this Williams quote is like one of the apocrypha of ModPo, but let's take it at its face value. I think what is useful in that idea for the Williams sort of school is thinking about the kind of a poem as a sort of set of relationships between objects. It's like it can be like an object in itself, which is interesting for when you want to make a kind of pure image. When it comes to like how we might think about that for somebody like Stein, I think Stein really wants to think about the material qualities of words and really wants to kind of make them feel denatured from their useful context, wherein they possess and express ideas like, oh, this is a cup, to kind of bring up our usual example. So when you kind of take them out of their context and you make them do the things that they don't naturally do, you get these great sets of sounds, relations, aesthetics that we get in something like If I Told Him. And that kind of rhythmic quality, that oral like quality of all of Stein's work, and really just the power of repetition for her, I think comes from thinking about language not as something that's going to transmit an idea necessarily, but as a little piece of like flesh that you can kind of throw around.
thank you, Gabe.
Thank you.
Amber Rose, you want to follow that up?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Gabe said. I think there's value to when you think about a word as a material. Like if you were to think about a word in the same way that you think about this cat, in the same way that you think about like nylon, as something that can like stretch or be ripped, or you can put a hole through it or something. Like if you were to think about a word in a sort of very material and physical sense, I think that it opens you up to play without feeling like you're sort of bound by the responsibility of being legible or being true to whatever meaning you think that word is supposed to carry.
That's a fantastic follow-up.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, really great. Lily, do you have something to add?
Yeah, going off of, really liked Amber Rose's concept of like stretching, because to me it implies that like with words, it is about like in order for the play to be successful, there has to be some kind of ground or standard or something that you're playing against maybe. And then for something to stretch, there has to be a form that it would supposedly like return to after it had stretched. And that the poetry is kind of like in that in-between state, like of, you know, it's not quite its brittle first form or the fully stretched second form, but maybe like somewhere in the stretching process. Like an example I'm thinking of from this week from A Dozen Cocktails, Please, is this line, it doesn't me, dash, which is an amazing line. And if you think about the word does or doesn't from like a learning English perspective, which I think we know for certain that English was not Baroness's first language, right?
German, yeah.
Yeah, so if you think about what that word is, it is both a verb and not a verb. It's a kind of a plastic, weird, it's like an auxiliary verb. And she's using it as though it were like a real verb, like as though you can be doesn'ted, right? And so it's plastic and being played with, but that line would read as complete, wouldn't read at all. Like it would read as nonsense if you didn't have some grounding in what the word quote unquote like should be to make sense.
Yeah. Fantastic. Helen, do you want to respond to any of those comments?
Yeah, it's going to mess around in my head for a while because it's so philosophical, I think, and because as you all were talking, I just wrote this down. You know, a word can be a thought. So, like, I think when I read in your lecture was a word is not a thought. And I'll go back and see if that's what I read, but it's not a thought necessarily, because I wondered, without words, where would thoughts come from?
Well, you know, Helen, at the very beginning of the modernist revolution, there were a lot of hyperbolic statements trying to get away from late 19th century poetry, which had gotten very, very flaccid and loose and rhetorical. So words became beautiful thoughts, and that's really what they were reacting against. So Williams said, Williams believed for about 5 minutes or 5 months that words were not thoughts, that they were words. Sorry, that poems were not beautiful thoughts, but words, that poems are made of words. And he described how poems are little machines made of words, which put him in line with the modernist collagists and sculptors who were interested in fact, I think so much depends upon, in the sense of depending, hanging from something, was probably a reference to the, what do we call those, assemblages of sculptors, of his colleagues in the plastic arts.
Oh, the Combines or the...
Yeah.
Like Rauschenberg and the Combines.
Yeah, mobile sculptures. I said collage, and that's wrong. So,
like Calderwood or something.
Like Calder.
Yeah. Like
Exactly.
Calder,
Yes, so much depends upon is a Calderian idea. So he was overreacting. Of course, Williams is as devoted to ideas and thoughts as anybody, but he said, no ideas but in things. Right?
Say it again?
And no ideas but in things was his big thing.
No ideas but in things.
But in things, yeah.
In things.
Right.
It's such it's so obtuse to me, but it's so, it's interesting because so much of what you all talk about puts me on, an angle that I don't even understand, but it's fascinating, and what I love is that you started with Dickinson. I mean, that grounded me. Do you know what I mean? I think that's just,
I think the strategy which, we fell into in ModPo of starting with Whitman and Dickinson, it's a very friendly way of getting into weird experimental poetry. Friendly in the sense that people grow up with Dickinson thinking, well, it's a ballad form, and I think I used to understand it, and Whitman is so, seemingly very open and generous. Why not climb in and hang on?
Yep.
But then it turns out that they're as freaky and angular as the rest of the people. You just sort of get you.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Helen. We look forward to seeing you next week. Really look forward to it.
Me too.
Thank you so much. All right. Have a good evening. 610-616-3208. And the next book we'll be giving away is Ray Armantrout's Just Saying. This book here, Zach. This one here, yeah. Oh, I can't see what's on the... Okay, good. All right, great. All right, so... I would like to ask a few people what we've got going on in Twitter and Facebook, if that's relevant, in the forums. So, Anna, read one forum comment.
I've got a question that I think Jess and Amber Rose should maybe answer, given their pre-webcast antics. You'll see why in a second. This wasn't on camera. This is from Apollina Bekova.
Oh, yeah, Apollina, right.
Yeah. She writes, I have one past midnight sleepy question about Stein, which honestly perfect. I've always loved Stein, but have been a bit confused by the comparison to cubism and the expansion of words. I mean, yes, in many ways that makes sense to me, but how about modern dance? We used to talk with my friends about words that dance on a page or off the page. What if the poem dances? It's like the first thing I see when I read a poem by Stein. I see it move and create itself in movement like something Isadora Duncan would do. I see the poems literally exist in movement, especially the long drafts. What do you guys think about Gertrude Stein and modern dance?
I think I'm going to preempt the dancers. They were dancing. Let the record show that they were dancing because they already got a chance to say something. I think I want to turn to Jason and Erica and you, Anna, for a response to that. Yeah. Okay. So, Erica, the analogy to dance and Stein, can words dance? Is that a relevant comparison? What do you want to do with that?
Well, I think that on the syllabus, there should be a link to there are a couple of different dance troupes that have done performances of If I Told Him. And I think that it's a really wonderful and important correlation.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I think that what Stein wants to do is she wants to make language dance.
Yeah.
So sonically considerate that I can't help but imagine her words dancing when I read them.
Yeah, it is true on the main syllabus. You can watch a dance choreographed to Stein's If I Told Him. Yes, so great. Jason, a thought on dance, poetry and dance?
Yeah, I was thinking on the way over here about, this will not seem like I'm talking about dance, but I'm getting to it.
I like the way now, you used to not warn us that was going to happen.
But I really love biology, and I was thinking about especially the tender buttons pieces as complex protein molecules that are kind of spit out by the DNA and then twist and turn with all of their different chemical bonds across atoms and turn into some sort of wild three-dimensional shape. And it's the surfaces of that totally random, not random, controlled by forces, but forces not pre-planned that allow the surface of the molecule to connect to another molecule to do its work.
So in a way, it's more chemistry than biology. You're basically saying that matter must dance because there's no such thing as matter that's just going to sit still in relation, one piece of it, one molecule to another. So everything is kinetic. So maybe poetry that still lies about the nature of reality. That's pretty cool. I like that. I think a lot of contemporary poets are naturally inclined to the assumption that everything is moving constantly. Yeah. Thank you. That was great. Anna?
I'm thinking, especially since, Al, as you said, we just recorded a video yesterday with Jerry Rothenberg about a Stein poem, a tender button called A Shawl. And I'm thinking back to Jerry's really amazing performance of that, like reading performance of that poem.
It was amazing.
Really, really good reading of that poem.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about how incredibly difficult it is to actually read Stein's poems, not in terms of like making semantic sense of them, which is a whole other topic, but actually to verbalize and read aloud Stein's poems. It's a really important and worthy exercise, I think, to just hearing the music and like the pleasure and like the joy of those poems, but just thinking about like the actual like mouth gymnastics that it takes to like form some of those words.
As Tristan Tzara said,
thought is made in the mouth.
Are made in the mouth.
Yeah. And that's true of Stein, I think. I think
That's
like
true of Stein.
Stein's poems are made in the mouth. Like when you
And Jackson McClue's comments specifically.
Really? Oh my
focus on
God!
them.
We should have had Jess answer this in the first place, because we're going to find out something really cool. And then I think we have someone on the phone, and then I have a little game I want to play to see what happens here. But Jess, tell us.
Just a footnote in response to the question about Stein and the relationship to modern dance, and specifically Isadora Duncan, who was a pioneer of modern dance. Stein actually wrote a portrait of Isadora Duncan called Orta, O-R-T-A, or One Dancing. And she wrote this around the time, I think, of the other early portraits, when she was thinking about, the relationship with her brother. And I think I'm here looking at the introduction. Anyway, that's just to say that there was a direct link there. Stein was looking at, at this modern dance and was, seeing her practice in dialogue with it.
And I think she certainly saw her investigation of dance as related to her investigation of Picasso's Cubism, which was not still as, Imagism was. Imagism succeeded by Cubism and Vorticism, all this movement stuff. I think they're related. Chris, let's take the phone call and then see how it goes.
Al, we have a long-distance call tonight. Clarissa Stein calling from Australia.
Oh, wow. Hi, Clarissa.
Hi, Elle, and your colleagues.
Oh, hey.
I'm really happy about being able to listen into these webcast sessions. They are great.
It's fantastic that you called. It must be about 10 a.m., 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Wow, not bad. Hey, how is Thursday going?
How is Thursday going?
Yeah, we're in
Thursday
Wednesday.
going so far is good.
I hope Thursday's better than Wednesday. This was a pretty tough day. We're going to send you, I don't know how long it'll take to get there, but we're going to send you a copy of Ray Armentrout's book, Just Saying. And I'm going to ask Gabe, who's a giant Ray Armentrout fan, if he would say a word or two about what rocks his world when he reads Ray Armentrout. Gabe, you up for that? Say something about Ray.
Yeah, to be short, everything in the whole world makes perfect sense when you read Ray Armentrout.
Wow. Damn. I love that recommendation.
Oh, also, wait 1 second. We were just saying that, what was it, Tristan Tzara quote? What was the Tristan Tzara quote?
Thought is made in the mouth.
Well, we made a poster of Ray Armentrout quote, which is from Fiction, her poem Fiction. And it's the sense of self starts in the mouth and spreads slowly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Gabe was here and introduced her. Am I remembering that right? You introduced Ray Armentrout. Clarissa, you've been very active in the forums. Thank you for that. And how's ModPo going for you? Is this your first year also?
Yes, I'm a first year ModPo, and I enjoy it. But I must say, the material is so much that I have already come a little bit behind to keep on doing the course as such.
Right. May I make a recommendation for you? Don't try to do everything every week. Do a little bit. You can always go back because ModPo is open all year. It's more fun to stay with us as we move through the weeks than to fall behind.
You won't lose me.
What's that?
You won't lose me.
Oh, great. I'm not worried about that. I'm just giving you some guidelines about how you can stay with us. But also, I really hope that you'll find this to be a fun community and that every autumn, your spring, you'll join us and do a little more each year and hang out with us. We're all planning on growing old at this table, which is why we're drinking so much wine. Do you have a question or a comment? Did we lose Clarissa?
Unfortunately, yes, we did.
Okay, so we're going to hope that she calls back. Clarissa, if you can hear us, call us back and ask another question. 610-616-3208. Oh, that's probably her.
We're going to find out.
He's going to talk with her for a while. How's it going, Clarissa? How you doing? How was your day? Okay, it's somebody else. All right, here's what we're going to do. So I am going to ask Lily to fire at us tweets.
Okay.
One at a time, though.
Okay.
One at a time.
You don't want questions because I have.
I think I want something. Whatever tweet you want. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do popcorn. I'm going to ask someone randomly after the tweet is said to respond very briefly to the tweet in any way briefly. So this is going to be a little game. Let's see. Yeah, so actually I'll tell you in advance. So Jess, you're first. You're going to respond to the tweet quickly. Go ahead, Lily.
Okay. Let's see. Well, yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, here's an interesting one. I have a really good question that I think the whole table should talk about. But you want something?
No,
different?
I want to do this game because we got somebody on the phone.
Okay.
So
But remind me to come back to this question.
Let's play my
Okay.
game by my rules.
Okay, I'm so glad I'm here reading this. Okay. Rama says in response to Jason's comment, they could do an fMRI study to see if brain areas correlate for dance and poetry.
Jess, respond quickly. Well, it's right up your alley. You just said it.
Okay. Well, I am not a poet, but I am a dancer. So, as
Should we scan your brain
exhibit 1, so far I have yet to find the correlation.
That's really cool. Another tweet. This will be Jake. This will be Jake responding to another tweet. Lightning round.
Okay, Jake, see if you agree with Colleen Knight's assertion that, quote, F-bombs are the norm in ModPo, so just get used to it.
Go ahead, Jake.
I've heard more than a few in my tenure here.
That's a good lightning round. Okay. Jason, lightning round. Go.
Okay.
I like this.
Okay, from Stephanie Starr. Stein has prepared us to hear through the excuse me. Stein has prepared us to hear through the current blab of the pave.
I like it. Current meaning what's happening today.
Yeah, I'll just read a sentence from Stein, from Composition as Explanation, and just listen how this resonates with Whitman. The composition is the thing seen by everyone living in the living they are doing. They are the composing of the composition that at the time they are living is the composition of the time in which they are living.
That is perfect because I have always read that explanation of composition as a deeply political statement about this day, about the day. I really have. Okay, Lily, it's going to be Emily Harnett, lightning round.
Okay.
Her strongest suit.
Oh, God.
This is from Kim Bridget Harrison. My 9-year-old son's question when I tried to explain what tonight's ModPo Live will be about. Here's the question. So, if you cut the top off of a fork, can you make something else out of it? I think he would like Stein.
This is great. I like this game. Emily, lightning round.
Yeah, I think small children are the best experimental poets. So there you go.
That's perfect. All right, Lily, this next one, then we're going to go to the phone. It's you. You're going to respond to the tweet that you quote.
Okay.
She's going to pick a easy one, a meatball.
No, there's meatball. I may have hit some of the best ones. Okay, let's see.
You are being selective. Don't be selective.
Well, a lot of them are quoting people. That's things people have
I
said.
like Stephanie Starr's most recent one from like a minute ago.
Go ahead, Anna, read it, and she'll respond.
Stephanie says, okay, I rarely drink, but I woke to what the president was saying, so pair no for me tonight. Just required anesthesia to go on ModPo Live. We know we must go on, narrative or no. Thanks for helping us feel less alone.
Oh.
If someone wants my thoughts on politics, they can talk to me.
Talk to me
off
on
of
the
this
side.
medium. I'm not trying to get targeted by.
Only once did we have a political webcast. Anybody remember? Gabe, you remember it?
November 9th, 2016.
Do well.
Yeah, it was the day after the election, a Wednesday after the Tuesday when Donald Trump was elected. and we talked about poetry. I think it was it week 5? No, it was much later, but
No, it was week 8, I think.
it was language poetry. Yeah. Oh, that was, yeah. Chris, who do we have on the phone?
Al, working the phone is a very interesting experience. I just want to say that. I thought...
Chris, what's happening to you?
It's one of those days.
Do you have a bottle back there, too?
Yeah, maybe. No, not really. Here's the funny thing. I thought Clarissa was calling back, but it was a different Australian caller. It is Eleanor Smagorinsky.
Oh, my gosh. That's crazy. Hi, Eleanor.
Hi, Al. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Eleanor, do you remember the very first time you called in, like, 2013?
Oh, my God. How did you know that was 2013? Yes, it was.
Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, I believe I called you Brad Pitt, and I...
You called me Brad Pitt. You think I'm going to forget that?
Oh, my God.
Amber Rose is about to knee me. But, no, you said, no, what I remember you I don't remember the Brad Pitt thing, seriously. But what I remember you saying was, you people are real. It's really you. Remember, you were so enthusiastic. And then, remember one day, my wife and I were walking along on the west side of Manhattan, and there you were. What the hell were you doing there?
I cannot believe it. No, and wait, and I was just about to get on my bike and bike down to Poet's house.
Yeah.
Which is where I kind of spend all my time now when I'm in Manhattan, you know, when I'm in Manhattan, which is not that often. It was the weirdest thing.
Who needs Poet's house? You were on your way to Poet's house, you ran into me. And then obviously you didn't need to go to Poet's house because we had a nice little chat. Anyway, it's so great that you called. And do you have a comment or question, or should we just hang out for a few minutes?
Oh, yeah. No. I have a couple of things.
Okay.
I thought it's a good opportunity for me to call in because, you know, if there's anyone, well, first of all, if there's anyone who remembers, like, the class of 2013, hello. I remember you all very fondly.
Yeah.
But also the people who are new, you know, new students, I thought it might be interesting for them to get a bit of a perspective on what it's like, you know, like 6 years later for someone who was a complete newbie then. And
Right.
I thought I could do that by first of all, just making a remark about specifically what you were talking about just now. Like at the beginning of the webcast, you were talking with Jake about, well, Jake Mama mentioned performance. And
Yeah.
I think there was, I think you misunderstood him a little bit, in the sense that I think what he was trying to say is that every persona in every poem is a type of performance. And this is something that I would like to bring up as an encouragement to new poetry readers who are taken aback by certain performances. This is all part of the game. And just like, what I would also like is to make recommendations. So if you're reading Gertrude Stein and you just don't have any idea what's going on, and okay, you've taken on board that it's a performance, may I advise, if you go and buy a book called Animal by Dorothea Lasky, and read what she says about the eye of the poem. It's a book of essays, so you don't have to really know that much about poetry. And read what she says about what's happening in the theatrical arena of the poem. Very much like what we were talking about earlier. Someone mentioned dance, again, a performance. I think that would be really helpful. And I'd also like to add two quick things. The only reason I ever found out about Dorothea Lasky was thanks to, I believe, Chris, who was on the phone just now. Because way back in 2013, I asked either him or Zach, I don't remember, who they'd recommend as an unusual woman who recites poetry in an unusual way.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, wait, Dorothea Lasky.
Wow.
And so thanks to, I believe it was Chris, I'd like to take it back full circle. And then again, come back to what I was saying about Gertrude Stein and performance. And I'd like to say hi to Jason Zuzga, who's sitting there.
Hi there.
Now, hi, Jason. Always in my heart for teaching me so much about Gertrude Stein. And what Jason taught me in 2013 about performance is actually some of the performances are not specific. They're very specific to certain audiences. And I want to put people's minds at ease who are new to Gertrude Stein. Yeah, you can think about the dance, you can think about the music, you can see the word singing or whatever. But truth be told, sometimes you just need to know stuff. And what Jason said to me about this one particular poem in 10 Buttons called Cold Climate, he's like, okay, we can have a lot of fun with this, but you really need to know that she's talking about Arthur Rimbaud. And no one really says that very much, that sometimes the audience for this particular performance in this tiny poem is someone who knows something that you don't know. And I think that can put beginners' minds at ease. Like, it's okay. You might not be the audience intended for this particular button. And I think that's why in ModPo, you only choose 3 or 4 of the buttons because, frankly, a lot of them require a different a different audience. And a thank you to all of you, because in these 6 years, I have, enjoyed poetry so much. And I must admit, and I don't know if many other people who've been, in ModPo for 6 years will say this, and this comes with love and respect, but I no longer think that any of you are geniuses, except for Jason. but I think that is the aim of the show. The aim of the show is that the people who learn from you guys get to the stage where they're empowered. And I can stand and bear witness to that. I don't say that I know, I don't know everything there is to know about poetry, but I can pick up the poetry journal that just came out in September. I can pick up the Paris Review. I can pick up the latest book by Kabe Akbar or Lainey Brown, or Rachel Zucker. I mean, these are just my favorites. But I mean, and I can enjoy myself and immerse myself in the poetry. And I think that's what it is. So for all of you newbies who think these are geniuses, honestly, they're not.
Eleanor, thank you. Thank you so much for calling.
Extremely generous.
We're going to try to respond to some of the things you said. I'm going to focus the question and get some responses. And I hope you'll listen after hanging up. And we love you so much for being part of ModPo, such a part of ModPo. And I should recommend you did a series of videos for the community crowdsourced close readings page, CCCR, that I highly recommend. They're really terrific. So thank you, Eleanor. Stay with us.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk to you soon. All right, fantastic.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Gabe, Jason, and Amber Rose to respond. I think I want to focus the question on, the newbies to Stein. Eleanor had a series of recommendations about how to get into it. I want to ask you guys to add yours to that. And along the way, you can comment on the point about democratization of expertise, except for Jason, because he's a genius, but the rest of us are not, it turns out, and it's partly because we keep urging people to believe in themselves that they can read poetry. You can comment on that as well. Pedagogical question. So I think I said Gabe first. Gabe, then Anna, was it? No, Gabe, then Amber Rose, and Jason. Gabe first.
Okay, let's see. Where should I start? Well, the only people I want to think that I'm a genius are the MacArthur Committee, because they have
All in favor of Gabe receiving a Genius Prize from the MacArthur, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any opposed? Chris Martin opposed it, but
You know what? And a resistance always brings you up a little bit. Anyways, no, it's good that nobody thinks we're genius, or that Eleanor doesn't think we're geniuses. First of all, because there's been a lot of things said in ModPo that are not right or true or Like, there's a lot of things that we say that you should not take as Bible. We are just like thinking out loud and spontaneously here. And an example of that might be whatever I say next. So, my usual go-to sort of like first advice for Stein is about humor. So let me just evade that because I've probably said that too many times. But I think other than that, maybe the first thing you should do is like stand up on a table and say whatever the Stein poem is out loud, because I just think like it just helps. Like that's what I do when I start to get disengaged with a poetry book that I'm reading, which happens a lot, is I just start to like recite it sort of as loudly as I can, just to get a little bit of its feel, not just in my mouth, but kind of in the room, and see what happens with that.
Yeah, that's a really great suggestion if you're encountering a poem that you can't handle. And it used to be when we did the week 4 webcast, we spent most of the time talking about resistance to Stein. And one of the reasons, Amber Rose, I think that's diminished is because it's not just us advocating for Stein. There's a whole community of ModPo people who are all over the forums, including the community TAs, who are saying, no, it's okay. You can do it this way. You can do it this way. So that it's not just, the people at the Ivy League table saying Stein, and everybody's going, I don't know. The first year it was a bloodbath, week 4. People hated it. They hated it. Do you remember that?
I do.
It was so depressing. And now we have other people who are advocating, and it just, I don't know, there's a mix of reactions, and it's like anything, in human community. Some people have a positive feeling, some have a negative feeling, but you don't want the people in charge to tell you should have a positive feeling when everybody else has a negative feeling. Amber Rose, what would you like to say?
I would like to say that I agree that you should read it out loud, especially standing up on a table. But I guess I also want to say something that I brought up in my office hour, which was from the Ron Silliman video.
On Stein.
Where he talks about poetry being a kind of writing that brings along, that actually brings its own definition of reading along with it, or something like this.
I think he says poems teach you how to read them as you read them.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something like that. Some combination of these things.
Right.
But this idea that you have to sort of develop a reading practice, redevelop a reading practice every time you engage with a poem, I feel like is useful. That maybe sounds like a lot of labor, but I think it's useful in thinking that you might need different tools for different poems. So some might mean you might need to stand up and say it out loud. Something that's useful for me is bringing a poem, when I feel like I'm overanalyzing a poem, sharing it with someone else who I feel like might not have the same sort of investment in trying to decipher, trying to figure it out. And that might be sharing it with my, 6-year-old nephew and just being like, tell me what sounds are interesting to you. Or sharing it with my mom, or someone who sort of feels like, well, I don't know, but these couple of words made sense, or I thought of this random thing. And that can sort of keep me loose from feeling like, if I'm feeling like my hold on meaning or legibility or decipherability is getting too tight.
Well said. Thank you. Jason, a quick comment on this, and then we're going to move on to some tweets and one more topic about Tzara, and then we're going to do final words.
Yeah, I think that poetry should, this is from Marjorie Perloff's essay, I think.
On Tender Buttons.
Yeah.
On the Carafe poem. Really good essay.
And I realized I didn't agree with it after reading it, and that I totally embrace, what's his name?
There's a lot of hymns out there.
The next one in the sequence. I can't find it. But the essay about all of the assonance and consonants, and
you mean an essay in ModPo? I'm not. You mean Ula Dido?
No, I mean by the poet X.
You mean John Peel Bishop?
No, I mean Hold on.
It doesn't matter.
All right.
It doesn't
Okay.
matter. You were going to say something about the Perloff piece.
The Jackson McLow
Yes.
close reading, I would say,
Of the correct.
is a really good
Yes.
place to start because it connects back to Perloff's essay as she quotes Wittgenstein saying, "Do not forget," Wittgenstein observed, "that a poem, even though it is composed in the language of information, is not used in the language game of giving information." And I don't necessarily agree with that entirely, but it's important in thinking about that in relationship to Stein. And I think of Stein at medical school in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins, reading these, if you want to feel foolish, you can pick up Grey's Anatomy, which I'm sure she read. And it's all about naming every particular joint and tendon and blood vessel in the body. And this is her way of talking about life without shutting it down with names.
Fantastic. Thank you, all three of you, for responding. What I'd like to do is toss out one more thing. We'll do a little Tristan Tzara, get a couple of responses, and then we'll do final words, maybe some more quotes from tweets. I just couldn't help but see Diana Knox, who says, please, please, this is the best time for all of us to get together and relax. I have joined you with a glass of Portuguese red. You started at 5 p.m. my time, happy time throughout the United States. Hashtag ModPo Live. Okay, Tzara. So he uses scissors, he cuts up newspaper, presumably current events, things happening in the daily newspaper, puts them in a bag, puts them together, then writes out the poem, and then the last line of this piece called To Make a Dadaist Poem is, and here you are, a writer, infinitely original and endowed with a sensibility that is charming, though beyond the understanding of the vulgar. Okay, you are a writer endowed with a sensibility charming. Okay, so then somebody in the forums this week, Susan Thompson, went ahead and did it. Took an article from the New York Times business section. Anybody know what's going on in the Times business section in the last couple of days?
Not it.
Lily, you've been keeping up.
Yeah, bad things.
Really bad things are starting to indicate, right? So jobs report will be out tomorrow, and there's a slowdown coming, and so the business section is all about that. So Susan Thompson went there, did her thing, put some words in a cup, picked them up randomly, added some breaks. Here's the result. I'll read it. And the question I'm going to ask every one of us, which is to say, going around very briefly to everyone, is, do we learn something from today's news, from this cut-up? Does it have meaning? Could one close read it, etc.? Okay? Is it a poem? Here it is. This is the New York Times, words from the Times. Near experiencing something, people 40, F-O-R-T-Y, people 40 unsettling engine, our time's powerful feeling, behind growth began after run, economic, them new miraculous, and world's China, best most its, that be its, the as, years. Pretty great. Okay, we're going to start with Anna and then Gabe, quickly. Can we read it? Is it a poem? What's it mean?
Well, I don't know what it means, but it's definitely a poem. And I know it's a poem because you contextualize it as a poem. So that question,
So it's a urinal from a hardware store, turn it upside down, sign it situation.
stuck it in the art museum. Okay, cool. It's art. Like I don't actually have to debate that.
You're very open-minded about that.
Well, sure. But like, if you're telling me what I'm about to read you is a poem, then I'm going to take you at your word. And then what becomes interesting is thinking about it as a poem and looking at it as a poem. Mm-hmm. So I'm not interested in having the debate of, is this a poem or not? Like, did the writer intend any of this or not? Like, that question is not interesting to me. What's interesting to me is then applying the things that I know and like about poems to the thing that you've already told me is a poem.
Tzara says it's infinitely original. Agree?
Agree.
Good. Thank you. Gabe, what do you think?
I think the cut up helps like remind you that the language of the thing it comes from is not as natural as it at first seems.
Fantastic. I think Erica's there, yes?
Erica's there, yeah.
Yep, she's there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, what do you think?
Absolutely. I feel like there's a huge amount to read and learn from this poem. I heard something like near experiencing something.
Yeah.
I mean,
Near
about that
experiencing
alone is really
something is the
rich.
first line.
Yeah. I mean,
Pretty
we're
great.
near experiencing something.
I mean, that's pretty great that you could grab
It is good.
randomly words from the Times business section from the floor, and the first line is near experiencing something. It's pretty great, right? Who needs intentional meaning?
Yeah.
For that to happen. I think we've lost Jake. He had to move on. So let's go to Emily Harnett.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a poem, and I think thinking about Anna's question, I'm also not sure what it means, but I think like what do we gain from deciding that it's not a poem, right? We gain nothing. If we say that it is a poem, then we gain something. We gain more poetry, which is certainly more interesting than just reading the worst parts of the New York Times.
Yes, much more interesting than the Times. Lily, then Jason.
For some reason, what this is making me think of is that if you do not buy a subscription to the New York Times, as I do not, but you sometimes want to use it to get your news, and you have reached your monthly limit of number of articles that you can read, sometimes your understanding of what is in the news article is a little more similar to the poem, the cut-up poem, than the full text of the article, because you caught a little bit behind the big image splash that comes up and obscures your view, and like you saw some in the Google search results or whatever. So seems good to me.
I think you and Jason are geniuses. You in addition. And also, you should get the MacArthur Prize.
Well, I'll share it with
No,
you.
I mean, what you just said made me think that I know so little about economics that when I read the business page, I get pretty much this.
Yeah.
Because that's as far as I can go.
Sure.
Okay, Jason, then Amber Rose.
I totally agree with Anna that there isn't something that we can point at and call it poetry. It's the act of pointing at it and calling it poetry that makes it a poem.
Yeah. It's pretty powerful, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah, and it's a practice, a way of seeing the world. I mean, can look at, like I'm looking over there, and there's a bag from Honey Grow, and it just says honey, 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 honey.
Honey, 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 grow, grow, grow.
And there's like a little horse standing above it, and that's a poem.
It is. And we'll come back to you and you'll give it a title. Ambrose, this makes me think something, for me, quite radical, for you guys, hardly, I'm sure. But there was a time when you walked around the planet as a human being and you didn't have any control over your identity. That is to say, you were what people thought you were, or you were born, supposedly, or whatever. And you had no control over saying, no, I'd really like to be this. It was also the same era in which a poem had to be a poem, and there were a lot of people patrolling what a poem was and wasn't. Now, I don't know about the relationship between those two, but I would say that happily we live in an era where someone can say, well, this is what I would like to be, this is what I would like you to consider me as, think about that thoughtfully, and, by the way, that's a poem, that's a piece of art, and I declare it so. And there's probably some relationship between those two freedoms, somehow. Amber Rose, what are you thinking?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is some relationship between those things. And I think part of that relationship is about sort of power and who holds it, and this idea that like there is one ideal human, there is one construction of a poem, there is sort of singular meaning and like singular entities that were all powerful, and everything was consolidated, and that's just what it was. And that was sort of based on this idea of exclusion and hierarchy and all of these things. But I think as folks started to sort of make room for other modes of being, it also makes possible claiming and naming other modes for a lot of things, like poems.
Fantastic. Jess, your thought on this?
Sure. It was wonderful to hear that poem, which I think by this point we've established is a poem. And as you read it, it made me think of two things that Stein said or wrote. And the first is from Composition as Explanation, which you said earlier. You've always seen that essay as being very
about contemporary politics.
Very political statement and about the now. And as you read that poem, it made me think about the difference between the time of the composition and the time in the composition. So, the practice, right, that went into it, and then the reference, right, or what those words were initially put into circulation to do. So it made me think about that, and it made me think again about something that came into my mind earlier when we were told, when it was revealed that none of us are geniuses, which I think is correct.
By someone who's in Thursday already.
Yeah.
But Eleanor didn't know you in 2013, so...
You could still be
a genius. Jess might still be a genius.
Well, I mean, according by the Steinian metric, I don't know. So one of the ways that Stein defined, being a genius, which of course she was,
yes,
right?
Oh boy.
Was that being a genius means that you listen and talk at once. And when you read that poem, it made me think about what that means.
Jess, it's so great that you've joined us. You're so wonderful. Thank you. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to hear, just to punctuate the moment, we're going to hear a couple of tweets. We're not going to respond to them, but Lily's just going to give us a little anthology of tweets. Anna's going to give us one favorite comment from the threads. And then we're going to do quick final words going around. So, Lily.
Colleen was upset that I quoted her tweet about saying the F word. So I'm going to read a much...
more thoughtful
tweet of hers. She's summarizing what Al said.
Hi, Colleen.
We live in an era where we can state what we would like people to know, what we are, and who we would like to be, and a poem can come from that. That's her summary of what you said.
That's better than what I said. I think that's great. A poem can come from that. I was stating these two parallel situations of relative freedom. And what Colleen is doing is saying that one comes from the other. That's pretty cool. Another one?
Let's see. Okay, a lot of nice quotes of what we've been saying, which is sweet. Well, I really like this tweet in question from Lena Holdman. Maybe we don't have time to talk about it, but just
so great. Lena writes all the essays.
Well, this was the comment I wanted to bring up earlier. She says, I posted this in the forums, but can Stein's views on narrative be restrictive at times? When I write a short story, there has to be a sequence of events, some kind of a beginning, a middle, and an end. Or am I being too literal about what she said?
I'm just going to say thank you for the resistance, Lena, because we and Rama, who's been really a wonderful ModPoer this year, said I want to talk about not just resistance but resentment to Stein. So I mean, we have to hear that. We have to hear that. And thank you, Lena, for being so straightforward about that. One more tweet and then one forum post.
Sanjeev sends snaps to Helen, first time caller from Boston.
They're going to meet next week.
And
Sanjeev is going to be at all of our events.
He says, that's what I like to see. The enthusiasm of first timers who are loving the course is infectious, which I think is true.
Great. Thank you. Anna, one thing from the threads? The thread?
Yeah, another question we didn't get a chance to get to that I really, really liked from Nicholas Stern, one of our CTAs.
Oh, yeah, Nicholas.
Nicholas says, questions. Are questions statements? If you ignore question marks, does that make the question a statement? I'm sorry, does that make the question a statement? No question mark. What is the purpose of ignoring question marks? Is it to conflate questions with statements as a kind of consequence of being in the continuous present? Here's one of many examples from objects. This is from a piece of coffee. Supposing that there was no reason for a distress and more likely for a number, supposing that there was no astonishment, is it not necessary to mingle astonishment?
The difference is spreading. Nicholas. Okay, so we're going to have final thoughts. They're going to be brief. Emily has to get up in the morning and teach a bunch of sophomores and juniors.
You got it.
Emily, it's so good to see you.
Oh, thanks so much.
Can you play
Al.
hooky from school and hang out with us more?
I would certainly love to hang out
Okay.
with you more
We'll
as long
write
as
a
I
note
could
to the
sleep in.
principal.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay, final thoughts. We're going to start with, I think Jake had to leave us, so we're going to start with Erica, then go to Gabe. You might want to just say what's on your mind about Stein or the Baroness or Dadaism. You might want to look forward to next week. You don't have to, because I'll be sending a lot of notes about next week. Week 5 is a major, major week for us. You might want to just ballyhoo something. So, Erica, you first. Thank you for joining us tonight, Erica.
Always a pleasure. It's one of my favorite weeks.
And we're going to talk by phone together on Friday, I think, you and I. Looking forward to that.
Me too. So for my final thought, I actually wanted to respond to the tweet that Lily read from Lena, which I read as a forum post and have been thinking about all week. And I just want to say to Lena that, the way that Stein talks about narrative is totally weird and constricting. And that quote is from a lecture in a book called Narration. And they're lectures that she gave at the University of Chicago in 1935. And when the book was published, it was published with an introduction by the writer Thornton Wilder, who became a really good friend of Stein's. And at some point about the very specific quote that we look at in ModPo, Wilder refers to what Stein is saying about the beginning, a middle, and an ending. He says that Stein talks about narration with a, quote, terrifying exactness.
Yeah.
So, that's certainly there. I don't think you're being literal. I think it's important to kind of honor that and also honor the fact that Stein is always playing.
Yeah. And the relationship with Stein and Wilder is a complicated one in terms of their art, because Wilder wrote pretty straightforward stuff. Thank you, Erica. Good to see you, as always. Gabe, final thoughts?
Yeah, one first thing is that because I'm a grad student, I changed my office hours. So now they're at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Mondays.
Great. Should we correct that, Anna? You already corrected it.
Oh, me and Anna we go way back.
I'm so out of it. All I do is block copy it and announce it. I'm like a bot, really, basically.
We got this covered. I just wanted to.
Thank you, Gabe. Have you been drinking?
No.
Well, you're very, very sassy tonight. Stop being so sassy.
No, I changed a light bulb in the middle of the webcast, which is why I'm now significantly better illuminated.
How many grad students does it take?
Oh, just one. What was I gonna say? I had something that was helpful and relevant and related. It's lost onto me now. What was it?
I can come back. You got it?
Yes, thank you. I think one thing we should talk about. We talk about fun a lot in Stein, and I do that at least because I'm trying to sort of bring people in and warm you up to it. But also, I think we should remember that Stein really consciously is thinking about what it might be like to make a poetry of boredom and of tedium. And that's actually, it's useful if you think about it, though it's not exactly pleasant. And I think the book of hers that really does the best with tedium is probably Three Lives, her first book, which there's a novella in there called Melantha, which is so unbearably complicated, but so good. So that's all.
Thank you, Gabe, and good to see you. See you brighter halfway through. All right, so let's go to Jason and Anna.
I wanted to say that my office hours started at 9, so
we're all in your office hour.
Yeah,
it's like some kind of weird dream.
Yeah.
This is really Jason's office hour.
Right.
It's an interactive office hour.
No, but I switched it to 10 to midnight. So if you
You're
want to
starting at midnight tonight?
No, starting at 10.
10 to midnight. Got it.
Depending on how quickly I get home.
Okay.
And simply to emphasize play with Stein. And if you took a bunch of adults and put them in a room with a big jungle gym, they wouldn't know what to do. They'd feel very frustrated and embarrassed. And I think that's how people feel in front of Stein, kind of exposed. And just let go and play.
I think, though I don't mean to be comparing the sublimity of Stein to the profanity of John Peel Bishop, but there's the same thing with Bishop. If you give that poem to a lot of adults who are fairly stiff, they're going to read it as a sonnet that's a little overwritten. And if you show it to people who've learned the language recently, they're going to see the obscenity down the left column. Thank you, Jason. Anna, final thought?
I have been thinking a lot about the Tristan Tzara How to Make a Dadaist Poem a lot this week, because I had one of my, when I taught that poem last week, because my class is a week ahead of where we are, I had one of my students asked, well, wait, is the Tristan Tzara, are those instructions the poem, or is the thing that you do after following the instructions the poem? And I've been thinking about that question nonstop, because I feel like I have an answer to that personally.
Yeah.
Which is that both.
Well, the week 9.2 poets will say the instructions are the poem. That's all that's left.
Yeah. Because the second to last bit, you read the final line.
Yeah.
But the second to last one is the poem will be like you.
Yes.
And
of course it will be.
And of course it will be. So I guess I just want to cheerlead a little bit for Tzara. I feel like we don't talk as much about Tzara or the Baroness, because Stein sort of takes up a lot of the air in the room, which, is great. Stein's also great. But I think we should all take Susan's example and give that How to Make a Dadaist Poem a try.
And Susan said, hey, ModPo Pen, thanks for the shout out and for the wonderful discussion. What great company. #ModPo Live. And I think we're going to ask Maura, who's our editor, to make a clip of that Tzara thing and add that to ModPo Plus. Okay, Lily, final thought, please.
Yeah, in Stein Week, I've been thinking about, respect to the Stein resistors. I'm a huge lover of narrative, and Alex to make fun of my taste in TV for
Friday Night Lights.
If anyone ever wants to talk about Friday Night Lights, please come to my office hours.
There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and at the end you cry.
Well, it'll be
oh my God,
me and
Al,
Emily.
you love it. Come on.
Oh, you too. That's right. I forgot. Oh,
I'm not ashamed.
I will out Emily.
However, the three of us totally love Deadwood. Talk about non-narrative.
Okay, I like a lot of TV, but my preferred genre is in more in the Friday Night Lights oriented
melodrama.
But what I've been thinking about
football.
Again, please stop by to get the real story on Friday Night Lights in my office hours, Thursdays at 11 a.m. What I've been thinking about Stein and this my respect for people who are resisting what they're reading is I think it feels like she's occluding or obscuring meaning. If you take an example like any of the Tender Buttons, and in my recent thinking and reading about them, I think it's more like she's seeing an aura or a ghostly series of presences and traces around the objects that she's writing about. So it maybe to her way of thinking or to my way of thinking, she's actually revealing more meaning about the objects, even though it seems like the way that she's writing is obscuring the meaning. And you're like, I wanted to know about a table. Why can't you just describe a table?
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you, Lily. Emily Harnett, final thought.
Yeah, on a similar vein, I'm still thinking about Colleen's comment about Stein being restrictive, and like Erica, and like you, Lily, I also think that's correct. And that, right, she's honest about what she doesn't like, but I think that honesty in itself is freeing. I think it's pretty clear that Stein thinks that narrative convention more generally, is just dumb. It's not to her taste, and she doesn't pretend otherwise. And I think by modeling that for us, she also lets us, right, be honest about what we like and what we don't like, right, reject the things that don't interest us and form a more meaningful connection with what does. And I think that's what it's all about, is finding the type of artwork that you resonate with, and digging in and moving on from there.
Thank you, Emily, and good to see you. Can you, sorry, I don't know, I know you don't like to do this because you're very modest, but do you have a new piece out, a new essay out somewhere?
Not yet, but I'm writing a weird piece about Centralia, that ghost town.
Centralia,
yeah,
you mean
yeah.
the town that kind of collapsed.
You got it.
In Pennsylvania.
Yeah, conducting some interviews.
Where will that be published? LitHub?
No, that'll be published in the print issue of the Baffler coming out.
Fantastic.
Sometime soon.
All right.
Thanks, Al.
Amber, you were welcome. Amber Rose, final thought.
Yeah, I have two brief final thoughts. And I'm also thinking about the folks that are having a hard time with Stein. And I guess I'm trying to think about the population of folks who maybe aren't even resisting it, but feel intimidated or feel sort of like whatever is in their mind is not enough to approach Stein.
They feel insufficient somehow.
Yeah, feel insufficient. Because that is something that I think we are taught to feel. And I guess I just want to give a gentle word to say, like, whatever's in your mind is enough. And even if there's only one word in a Stein poem that resonates with you, take that one word as your entrance and just follow wherever it leads you.
Great suggestion.
And
you had a second thought, I think.
Yeah, my small second thought that I thought about when Lily was talking about this sort of aura around is something that helps me when I feel intimidated by a poem is to try to make a poem that's sort of similar. So in the same way that you have that game, I think it's called Taboo, where like you have to get your team, you have to sort of describe something, but you can't say the main word and you can't say a bunch of like related words. Take an object in your house and like try to think of the main words that you would use, to describe that thing and put them on like a don't touch list and then try to write a poem describing that object. And you might end up with something that looks sort of Steinian.
Very cool. Thank you, Amber Rose. Jess, final thought.
Sure. Amber Rose, I love what you just said. I'm not sure if I can follow that, but for my final thought, I guess I will share an image that might be delightful. The writer Sherwood Anderson, whose name appeared in the forum somewhere, I don't know. I have a kind of a weird affinity for Anderson. I don't know why. And he was
Winesburg, Ohio.
Yeah,
quite a book.
Right, exactly. He
Friend
was
of Stein.
he was a friend of Stein, and he facilitated the introduction of Hemingway and all of this. There's some good lore there, and they corresponded. And she wrote a Valentine to Sherwood Anderson. Anyway, that's all incidental. But Sherwood Anderson wrote a piece about several authors, one of whom was Stein. And he likened Stein to a woman in a kitchen, like making a pie. And what he said was that Stein is in her word kitchen, laying word against word, as if to make a lattice pie crust or something. And I've always loved this image, not just because Stein like worked at home, but like the domestic was so important to her. But at the same time, the irony is that she wasn't doing any of the cooking.
Right. Somebody else
and that's
was.
and that's worth remembering. But still, I like this image because, it underlines the fact of play, and also the fact of like opening up words to be, things, opening up other kinds of legibility or experience, right? Like, what if we just could eat it? Like what if like reading was that?
Yum.
So, Stein in the word kitchen. There you go.
I love that. Thank you, Jess. Okay, I have. I want to conclude by reading a post by Jean Tsai. But first, just a couple of thank yous. Chris and Zach and Leah. Is that Leah back there? Hi, Leah. Thank you guys for doing all the tech. It isn't easy to do one of these webcasts. It is not easy, and you do it so beautifully. Helen O'Neill, Clarissa Stein, 2 first-timers called us tonight, and Eleanor Smagorinsky, our old friend, and Dave Bender joined us, and Dave's very involved with the Philadelphia gang, trying to keep them together. So thank you, Dave, for all your involvement in our community over the years. Jess, Amber Rose, Lily, Emily, Anna, Jason, Gabe, Erica, and Jake, who had to leave us. Thank you. You're all so wonderful. Dear friends, this ModPo really depends very much on you kind of reflecting the variety of reactions, since we can't have a lot of ModPoers in the room. You guys sort of are mirrors of all kinds of views, so that's great. A reminder again, we'll be in Boston next week, some of us, and the webcast is Thursday, not Wednesday, and we have 2 events, one on Thursday night at MIT and one on Saturday night at the home of Lisa New, and we'll send some more information. But if you're in the Boston area or would like to come to Boston, please let us know. Write to modpo@writing.upenn.edu, modpo@writing.upenn.edu. Thank you to Malbec, to Campo, that makes a fine, from Argentina. We have some Argentine ModPoers. Thank you for existing and for growing grapes. Jean Tsai, concluding tonight. Thank you all. Good night. And here is Jean Tsai. We're going to go out with Jean Tsai. I was an English major, but prose was always my focus. I have been a sporadic reader of poetry, probably because I didn't have a strong process in which to approach it. Close reading provides a pathway for poems that don't immediately touch me. My process is that I read a poem over for overall impression, lyricism, emotion. Does it touch my soul, as Magdalena put it? It's Magdalena from Warsaw, another ModPoer. If it does, I delve deeper. I think close reading provides a pathway into the intellectuality of a poem, which I didn't have before. Now I take note of what obviously stands out in a poem: length of a line, capitalization, alliteration, and I even try to look beyond that if I don't have a key to grasp in the way that ModPo teaches. I certainly still don't have it down, but watching the ModPo videos has shown there is a pathway even in hidden, and that is worth going down. That is the pathway. I've also thought of poetry as solitary, but I see that many minds truly helps. I went to the Chicago meetup last weekend with Max, and it was really wonderful and exciting to work within our small group. After we finished, I had the satisfaction in feeling that work had been done that I was proud of, it being a Saturday, even though it would never be measured in output. So thank you, Jean Tsai, for taking what we're doing seriously, and thanks for hanging out with the people in Chicago. We wish you a good night, and we'll see you toward the end of week 4 and into week 5. So thanks everybody, and good night.